order right here at 5:03. And I guess we'll go to the phones for the public comment and take questions from the people in the room at the end. That's what we did last week or last month. That's all right with everybody?
Yep.
That with me.
Okay, so anybody on the phone, Ben?
Yeah, the one person we have requesting public comment is Jay McBurney. Mr. McBurney, I'm unmuting you now, so go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Jay McBurney. I live in the Countryside Division of Westminster, and my comment is regarding the noise roundtable at the airport. And mainly my point is I would like to see more engagement from the flight schools and from the tower, because it's really heavy on the city and county representatives, which are pretty far removed from the airport. And I find the noise group to be too focused on the VFR departure routes, development plans at the airport, and discussion of maneuvers up around, Niwot and Gun Barrel and pretty far-flung places. So, and this is partially due to the lack of involvement by the Jeffco residents. And so I think we need some more focus on the most heavily impacted residents, which are under the training pattern. I'm right under the downwind pattern, kind of on the eastern end of that. So a lot of the noise solutions are more technical, and a lot of them are just basically following the noise abatement guidelines whenever they can, such as altitude, climbing over the uninhabited or commercial area before they turn crosswind, not turning based on visual cues. When they have a high density altitude, they seem to try to turn at the same spot, and they're coming over our neighborhood at a very low altitude. The tower can be involved in using alternate runways, giving it some variation, especially when it's not busy, running the 12 left runway over the commercial areas that are uninhabited in the evenings. So I've seen some improvement, in the last year or so with the late training. It's not going quite as late, and they do tend to shift to the north runway there. And I think that two-way dialogue will allow us to make more progress, and just feedback, going back and forth with the feedback rather than just being kind of in an echo chamber, the airport being in one echo chamber and the residents being in the other. So that's basically what I wanted to say, just that basically the schools and the tower, should engage with the residents, because I think that's the easiest, cheapest solutions to some of the problems that are generating excess complaints. So thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Ben, anybody else in the queue?
I have oh, go ahead. Am I up? Can you guys hear me? Am I free to comment right now?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can jump in, Joe.
First of all, what was the caller's name who just called in?
Jay McBurney.
Jay McBurney. So Jay, first, Joe Ramos here, one of the board members. Thank you for just such reasonable and kind and non-confrontational approach to this that you've taken tonight. It's very pleasant for me to hear someone like you come on with this sort of approach, both as a pilot and again, as a resident of the county and a business member of the county. I'm very appreciative that you've taken your approach. So first, thank you for that. Second of all, I think that's actually, it's funny we get this far into all of this, and for you to make such a sound suggestion of really getting, kind of the schools and the tower together to just engage with you guys. I'm in full support of that, of allowing them to engage and you guys to engage. And if one of us has to step forward and be a meeting moderator or anything like that, I would be happy to do anything like that. I think communication is critical, and communication in the form you've just put forward tends to be very constructive rather than destructive. So in addition to a thank you, I think you've presented a very nice idea.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Then we still have no one else in the comment queue?
No one else is registered to speak.
Okay, well then let's move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the approval of last meeting's minutes. Everybody have a chance to look at those? It looked okay to me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, if we can have a motion to accept.
I'll make a motion to accept.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, guys. All in favor of accepting the minutes as written?
A.
Aye. So I think we got a unanimous approval for those in attendance. We don't have to call anybody out of a meeting like Jansen. All right, on to the next item, the business items. So we're going to talk about AVEX for a few minutes. Paul, is that you?
It is me by default. We had AVEX, which is one of our tenants here. They are a MRO, manufacturing repair organization here on the airfield that does work on the TBM aircraft. They have one of the larger hangars here on the aircraft, and they were due to speak. About 45 minutes ago, I got a call that they had a prop strike, and their maintenance person and their QA person, who were the speakers, are going to handle that. So they will kindly ask to be rescheduled for another meeting because I think their story is pretty interesting, and what they've accomplished here in a short amount of time, showing up about 3 years ago and now literally bursting at the seams as one of the premier TBM repair facilities in the nation. I think it'd be nice to have them come and talk to the board and talk to the public and get them out. So their apologies and my apologies, but they would like to come next month or at a different month and speak to the board.
Wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd certainly love to hear from them. They should bring their sales guy because they got to get Joe out of that PC-12. All right, let's see. So on to one of the topics that we were just discussing a few minutes ago with the noise roundtable comments. So VFR routing procedures and noise abatement, which of course is a focus area of the noise roundtable. So I think, Paul, you wanted to share some of that, our progress?
I'm actually going to let Ben take this one.
Okay.
All right, and we have one more board member just walking into the room here.
Ron, how are you?
Good, guys. How are you? How are you doing, John? Good.
All right, welcome.
So we wanted to mainly kind of keep you guys updated to the work we've been discussing with the roundtable, because ultimately I think this is gonna fall on some of the members of the advisory board and other aviation stakeholders to help through this process. And so we figured the earlier we start bouncing it off of some of you guys, the more prepared we can be in terms of what direction this should go. But just, I'll give a little background on where we're headed with this kind of proposed process, and then I have some questions for you at the end. So for some of you, this might be review, but if you haven't heard, one of the big recommendations of this Superior Louisville study a couple of years ago was we should identify and implement voluntary VFR arrival and departure routes. And we even got so far as to start talking with the consultants from that study as to what those might look like. And then we reached out to the FAA, and the FAA said, "You're not doing that." And then they essentially said, "Before you do that, you need to form a roundtable so that the entire community is engaged in the process." So we formed the roundtable, and here we are a year to 2 years later. So now we're picking up that work again. And the intent again is to identify routes that have the least impact on the adjacent communities as people ingress and egress out of the Class D. Because that's one of the things we hear the most from nearby residents is just, why are they overflying, for example, downtown Louisville, when they could be overflying open space? Now, some people have objections to people flying over open space, so the whole point of this is that there is a kind of an open dialogue among the community members and among the aviation community of whether there's even a way to identify some kind of preferred routes into and out of the Class D. Ideally, there's maybe waypoints or, easily identified landmarks that people can use to get in and out that even ATC buys off on. So ultimately, this goes to the FAA if we can get it that far. And so, there's a number of stakeholders involved, you guys being one of them. I did want to mention at the last meeting of the roundtable, one member, the Boulder County representative, felt very strongly about that the scope of work should include a consideration of the equitable distribution of flights among the respective member communities. And Paul and I and others have educated the roundtable about kind of the freedom of airspace and the ability of pilots to choose where they want to fly based on what they're trying to do and where they're trying to go. But the roundtable still wants to kind of look at whether there's a way to suggest people fly more often in different directions. And, they're mainly responding to that map on the right, which has kind of been presented to the city of Louisville and has gotten a lot of attention of the storyline of why does all VFR traffic head to the north from the airport. So that's one focus for some of the roundtable members. So I just mentioned that just for your information.
Is that a heat noise map
Yes, it's
Yes.
a heat map of VFR departures from.
by sound?
They
Yeah.
briefed that as 1 month of flight tracks out of RMMA and the other surrounding airports. You can kind of see Erie up there, and there was a lot of flaws in the presentation because there was a lot of assumptions made by someone who's not an aviation person. But he took this off of, I think, Flight Track 24 and then added some assumptions to it about altitudes and different things. But in that presentation, this is what came out as the vast majority of the traffic's heading to the north. And we've explained hundreds of times why that is.
How can we look at the departures without looking at if most of the departures are going north, that means most of the arrivals are coming from the same direction. And so it's kind of hard to look at this without seeing where the arrivals are coming in.
Yeah, I think this is supposed to be both departures and arrivals. I think it's cumulative flight tracks. So if a plane takes off from here and goes and does, touch and goes at Erie or Longmont and comes back, that should all be on this map. And it's even sometimes segmented by altitude. I think they can parse it out by altitude. But like Paul said, we've kind of explained the nature of why people fly that way. And there's another chart coming up that we've used to educate the members about this. But I think the intent would be, can you agree with the members that there's probably a way you could channel this traffic a little more into corridors that are least disruptive to some of the communities?
Pretty good corridor you got right there.
Yeah, you can see the IFR arrival track right there. So yes, keep the questions and comments coming because, we want to be considering all this. Paul and I both have some flying experience, but I'm sure we're not thinking of all this and neither of us fly out of this airport. So that's why we're
First
bringing
of
this
all,
up to you all.
you're not gonna go to the east because of the Class B, right?
Yep.
I can't imagine the FAA is gonna want to interfere with that approach to 1-2 left
Possibly.
as an identified corridor. So is it like threading the needle that everybody tries to get in line on? How Nora, I've never dealt with a VFR corridor. I mean, we dealt with noise a lot in Telluride. But we ended up with areas and we actually went the opposite way of just kind of no fly areas.
We've talked
So
about that.
we don't like no-fly areas because one, I can't stop you from flying in a no-fly
Correct.
area.
That's
You're,
right.
you're completely illegit. And so that gives a false expectation of, I'm in a no-fly area. Why are you flying over my house? And why aren't I, as the director, as Ben, stopping you? So that we don't like that. The other thing is, there was a no-fly map when I first got here, and it was basically a 360-degree map that was all red, with no way to get into the airport, basically.
Yeah, like severe.
So,
Well,
so it's like,
yeah,
if I start parsing it down and leaving spaces, and then people are like, well, was my house still in it? Why is my house not in it? And so what we try to do is say, we don't have the authority to say there's a no-fly area. What we do have is the ability to show you why they fly to the north or to the east or to the west, and why they don't, due to airspace, mountains, and different constrictions, and possibly come up with a VFR corridor. And I'll tell you, every base that I ever flew into in 21 years had checkpoints going into it. So the military lives by that stuff. And that's where it kind of was like, hey, this seems to make sense. And the reason we want to engage the roundtable members and the advisory board members and the flight schools and the businesses and air traffic control is because exactly what in my experience, flew 90% of my flights into a military base. So that's how we do it. I also turned off, immediately because I had 15,000 horsepower and I could get 10 feet off the ground and turn out. We don't do that in small planes. So we need that vast array of experience at different levels and different aircraft to say what makes sense. We may never come to a consensus, and this may be just an exercise, but we may get to something that eventually we could project to the FAA that they would approve, and then we would have a voluntary corridor. And I think that's the key, that after all this is said and done, it's always going to be voluntary. Because if you're coming from San Diego and you don't know about it, it's not illegal not to fly that checkpoint, come in. You can still call tower and do your normal, downwind approach or whatnot.
Well, we create part of this because we don't want to fly over Rock Creek. So we tell pilots to get some altitude and immediately turn right, which puts us right into that corridor where all the traffic is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Randy, and, so their request to disperse the routes, I mean, maybe there's another departure that heads further west over the Marshall Mesa open space before returning north. But all stuff we talked about.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done as we're all aware. I will make one comment. If any of you have sat in on the roundtable discussions or you can do that in the future. It seems to me, and Paul, you can jump in here, Ben too, but it seems to me all of the representatives, with one exception, one notable exception, are at least trying to find a solution as a team, as a team of communities, and try to find something that can work for the majority of the participants and all their constituents. There's one that's kind of a dig in the heels and outlier, but the rest are, the dialogue is at least trying to find a constructive path forward. And that's really what we're after. And of course, that's going to involve lots of pilot groups and businesses and the FAA.
is the tower folks here on the roundtable?
They are not. So the roundtable's members of governments within 5 miles of the airport. So I'm going to it's Boulder County, Jefferson County, then it's Louisville, Superior, Lafayette, Arvada, Westminster, Brookfield. So there's now 2.5 years ago, we had what we started out, and Randy and Phil remember this, as a noise task force. And the air traffic controllers were part of that. And that's where we came up with our voluntary noise measures. Climb as fast as you can, stay at altitudes, fly steeper approaches, lower engine RPM and Fable, a couple other ones. And then we kind of got into this, hey, you can't really do this unless you have an official roundtable that's recognized by the FAA to come up. So we were on this track to try to find some VFR routes. And then we got COVID got in the way, and then we started the roundtable, and then we've kind of been educating the roundtable. But our thought would be that we would reconstitute that, and those members would be members of the roundtable, and that would not be the entire roundtable. That would be like 2 special people to kind of, subcommittee basically, members of the advisory board, members of the different flight schools, air traffic control, some businesses, and then ultimately also airport staff as sort of the moderator and keeper of the knowledge.
Well, the reason I asked if the tower is involved, or at least could provide input, is that there's a lot of ways they do things of getting everybody in here. And you could come up with all these great ideas, but is it working with what they're doing?
100%. And I think that's why we, as Ben said in his introduction, we want to kind of get this out there. This has been talked about at the roundtable. We're now kind of going to the next step, bringing you all in. Our next meeting will be probably not an advisory board meeting, but a noise task force meeting with the tower, with the flight schools, with the different members, and actually, break out the big board and start looking at it, and then have the tower go, nope, that'll never work, and yeah, we like that, and then the pilots go, well, that'll never work, and how does, and again, we may not come to a solution. This is
Yeah.
complicated airspace. It's not like, out in the middle of Kansas or on the coast where you can go up the coast and turn in over the water. This is about as complicated airspace as you're gonna find in the country. And so with that, Ben, let's talk about our airspace. What do we got here?
So, yeah, we've shown them this map a number of times to explain why pilots often choose to go north. And back to your point about ATC, the one thing I think we've learned is that the FAA is a big beast, and the ATC guys can only say so much before, they get nervous about speaking for the rest of the other sections of the FAA. And so, the question is, how do we get all of the FAA plugged in? And this is the process we were told it takes, so.
I mean, I'm just wondering if, even at the onset, even having, I don't know how you would frame it as an off-record meeting or in my world, a workshop that's not committing to anything, that's just a discussion of, hey, get people here and then we'll work them in, or get, before we, because if you do all this work and then come to them and they send you back to the, say, no, because this, and this, and I have hard traffic here, and just doesn't work. So I don't know if that was a thought, but I mean.
I think, to what Paul said, I think the intent is hopefully that they open up in a task force meeting with kind of airport tenants. They have before.
So the other thing that strikes me about the heat map,
Go back to.
would you say that's fair then? I mean, that shocks me.
But that's a month,
So it
so
has
that's
to be.
30 days of flights,
Flight school training.
a lot of it. I mean, especially if you look at the pattern. Well, we like to call that GA training, not
GA
necessarily. We don't like to separate our flight schools from general aviation, because you have a plane and may go out and do your 3 landings or whatever, and you fly enough, you probably don't do that. But there are many, many people who, I gotta get my landings in, they'll go out, bust up some landings. Do I think that is fair? I don't think it captures the whole picture. And the reason I say that is, well, let's do a heat map of Highway 36 and Highway 70 and McCaslin Boulevard and Indiana in 93. Guess what? The world's a busy place.
Yeah.
This is the fastest growing place. I think it's moderately accurate of what our patterns look like and our traffic going to the north and our IFR coming in. So,
So I'm not saying that in a negative context. I'm actually saying it in a positive, and here's why in my mind. If 70%, 80% of those flights going north, 'cause I never go, are GA training, that's much more manageable in my mind of getting a corridor. Because you go down, you walk over to McAir, you walk to all these big flight schools who probably have most of the training going on, and you create you could even have just a good neighbor type scenario. Hey, going out, you're follow this path, once you agree on the path, and outbound, you fly at this altitude, north to Boulder, go wherever you want, or coming back in, or at another altitude.
So I think
But-
you're right.
but that's
Most of the GA, what we see there is that GA training flight. That's the people who are going north to the uncontrolled airspace so that they can do their maneuvers, and then they come back, they do a few landings, and then they, turn the plane over to the next student who does the same thing. The nice thing about it is the flight schools are all involved. So when we did our noise task force, they were all sitting here very, engaged, and they want to come up with a solution. So I think that, again, I think that's the first step is to get the buy-in of all the stakeholders, and I think we have that for the most part. And then to see what is in the realm of the possible.
I have one quick comment to this as well. I really like the ideas that you're talking about, getting the stakeholders together and conversation about this, and you know, doing our best. And I do appreciate your transparency, Paul, in saying, but no promises, because there may not be an answer here, because and you said a key thing, which is it's a complex airspace. If you'll go ahead 2 slides to where it shows the Class Bravo airspace, I'll show you what they do, and it falls right along this. So if you look, actually go back 1 slide, because that'll help me show you where Louisville is in relation to this. So obviously there's our you see right about where the star is, basically in the box, the 8,000 foot box there. It's just right off the edge of this Class Bravo airspace, and that ceiling there is that you know, we've got to either be below 8 or above 12 right there, as you can see. And we really need the public to understand how hard I think the pilots work and the airport's working to try to make this work, but how difficult and complex it is. If you come off a 5,600 foot runway and you're only 1,000 foot up or 1,500 feet above it, you're very quickly getting very close to that 8,000 foot line there. So what's happening with all the student pilots is they're flying out and they're turning directly north to stay along that Class Bravo airspace, which takes them almost immediately right over the area where the residents are complaining. And that's that high intense area we saw in that heat map. And this Class Bravo airspace, which I think, you know, as you guys have rightfully said, is not going to change, forces that traffic right there. A lot of people are afraid of busting that Class Bravo airspace, and they're immediately turning and flying right along that line. Now, let me tell you from a pilot's perspective what they do to you. If you're coming in here, I frequently fly over the mountains to come in, and I try to drop over to Boulder. I have offices in Idaho, so I fly kind of in from that direction. I'm always out in Nevada, Arizona. And when I'm in Nevada, I come across. What happens is they direct me all the way north towards Cheyenne to an intersection called Barger. This is flying IFR flight plans. They direct me north, and they fly me right down that corridor too, coming inbound. So what ends up happening, and I don't like it as a pilot, because I know all those other pilots are avoiding the Class Bravo who are not flying IFR, they're flying VFR. They're coming right up at me, almost in a head-on, and ATC is directing me right down at them. And so a lot of this, you know, and again, it goes back to this complex airspace. I sit there and scratch my head and go, gosh, I would really love to help these people. How do we do this? And knowing that, you know, ATC is directing me right down at them, knowing why these pilots are flying that north corridor there, you know, we've got a real task on our hands here for that. It's a real complex area for the VFR guys going out and the IFR guys coming in. And, you know, I would fly over Boulder every time or come in from that way over the mountains, and they always direct me up, and they always drive me right down that corridor. I probably contributed to that heat map coming in, and I'm an IFR guy.
So
You
after
know,
that, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting looking at that heat map. It's a short time study. I wonder what the winds were every day. I mean, how much is that, or the winds from the west and the east, and how much does that drive? Because it looks like it's almost directly north, which surprises me a little bit, that it's not a little bit farther to the east there. And also with the amount of traffic, with the 2 different frequencies now coming in, you know, there's a lot of holding going on both east and west of that corridor. So you've got the incoming traffic, and they drive it right, everybody else right through that corridor, I think. And so, and then the altitudes, like Joe said, are restricted. So where do you put it? Because you take off and you climb to 7, but you don't want to go to 8, and then you're looking for that traffic coming in after you or at you. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. You are right in that airspace immediately. If you don't turn north and stay, you know, 1,000 feet, really, you know, 1,500 feet above where you took off from, it's really tough as a pilot. And you know, it does involve, I think, a conversation for multiple people here. But I just, you know, I really would like the community to know that just, you know, we care about this as an airport and as a board. But this involves some powers outside of ours with how these airspaces are developed and how they're directing traffic in. And that's not our tower directing us in, by the way. That's not Rocky Mountain Metro's tower I'm talking about. I'm with DIA control coming in, and they're running me right down that thing.
Well, IFR departure off of going west, they immediately turn you right through there and head you out east. And they, it's anywhere from 8,000 to 9 to hold you at till they get you above DIA or Class B.
That's exactly right. You're spot on, Randy.
Yeah, these are all great comments, and I should have mentioned this earlier. But one of the recommendations we've had to the roundtable is that they hire kind of an expert consultant, and they're seeking the funds to do that. Right now, they're looking at a company called HMMH, which is kind of a leading consulting firm in the country for all sorts of kind of work with the FAA. So we'd love it for it to be a group like that who can come in and facilitate these types of discussions, both with you all and the community, and can speak the language of pilots and controllers and really have a credible voice to the roundtable. So it's not Paul and I explaining why this is the way it is. And I think all the comments you guys are giving us, I expect we'll hopefully have to do that again with them. And, maybe they have great ideas we haven't thought of, and maybe they don't.
One concept, if a lot of that is GA training, is we work with flight schools to establish a training area, which can get put on the VFR maps. That's between here and Chatfield, right? Because the Chatfield one is busy as crap with Centennial training. But is there one in between? The only thing I wonder what the FAA might say, well, because they've got the Lark's arrival and the Powder arrivals.
John, the reason I smirked
Yeah.
is, again, when I first got here, there was a unofficial northern training area that was being distributed out there. And it had never been approved by anyone, it had never been vetted by the FAA, so we pulled it. And we said, no, there is no northern training area. We don't have that authority to direct people to that. Again, that may be something we could do through this process and through this consultant who then runs it through the FAA and gets it on the map. But we pulled it off all the charts, we pulled it off all the references because, again, we don't direct anybody to use it. Officially, there is nothing. But if you looked at that one slide where you got mountains to the west, DIA's airspace to the east, Denver to the south, you're gonna go, and the area to the south of this airport is very constricted. So you can't get that many aircraft in here. Whereas as you go north, you've got much more open space and uncontrolled airspace where you can operate in.
Well, and if they're going out on a training flight to do air work, that's one thing. But there's another reason they go north, and it's because of all the airports up there to go to, whether it's VFR or IFR training, right? If you're gonna go up there. I mean, you wanna go to Centennial and mess around with that? No. So there are no, I mean, from there, you either have to go all the way around and over to Front Range or all the way to Colorado Springs. So. It's just.
One of the things we could do, I think, the general public, they don't understand how many airplanes are really up there. They see an airplane here and one over there and they go, oh yeah, they're flying over. When everybody finally got traffic on their GPSs, you take off and go north sometimes and they scare you and say, I don't want to be up here. And I think we get some good pictures off of your GPS of 750 because you see all the traffic, the altitudes and which way they're going. And they'd start to understand it's not very easy because, a lot of pilots, until you got traffic, said, oh, well, yeah, there's somebody over there. I see him. And then you get to traffic, you go, holy shit, they're all over the place.
I'm going to do that, Randy. Next time I fly in, I'm going to take a picture of my screen on my Apex. It's lit up with bees and they're flying me right down that corridor, right at it. I would much rather come in from the other angle, but DIA is flying me down that. I'm going to take a picture next time. And I think if the public knew that, they would see the great efforts that we're making at Metro, as well as the potential efforts pilots could make if allowed.
Yeah. That's great. And for you IFR guys, I know the FAA is actually considering some visual IFR approaches, one of which is should make approaches easier from the south. We've just seen kind of an internal working draft of that, and I don't know where they are in that process, but maybe that ties into this somehow.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Joe said, because normally, I mean, the predominant runway is 30, right? And so that's interesting if they're flying Joe, when you come, are you coming from the northwest? Is that why they're taking you? Because I come from the south all the time.
Literally,
usually I'm the Powder, whatever it is today, or Usually I'm the powder arrival, so.
Yeah, what I do is I come in from Nevada and I come across Utah and I go through that corridor over Windover and all that to Salt Lake. And when I come across, it's almost straight across to come over and come into the airport to drop
Yep.
over by Boulder and in. And instead they route me, you know, all the way north towards Cheyenne. I have to hit Barger, kind of a Laramie, Barger, and then come right down that corridor at this. And they cost me a ton of time and they run more traffic down that very corridor right where you guys are showing that pattern at. And I don't want to do it. I could be one of the guys over there barely making a line coming over the mountains and coming in, but they just don't allow it.
You know, you're right. There's not a rival procedure, I don't think, that comes around over Boulder, that area. Is there?
No, they direct you up north and you come right down that corridor, Randy.
I've come across from there before where you'd be up high and they'd say, can you make it? We'll send you direct. And then you just drop right down.
Mhm.
But they don't do that very often.
Yeah, rarely now. Now that it's gotten busier with the commercial traffic out of DIA, I don't get that anymore. I used to get that, you know, but I'd say for the last year and a half or so, 2 years at least, I haven't gotten it.
Well, they will then short staff too, and so they try to make it easier on themselves.
Yeah, well, I think the discussion is great. And I think the points you guys brought up are great. And if there's an opportunity for our board to be of an assistance to the community by explaining to the FAA or any of those, you know, consultants that are coming in on this, I think, you know, we could be of great assistance as a board to the community when we could explain to the FAA what they're doing. Because I think I really do feel that Metro is taking a lot of heat for things beyond its control.
I don't give a lot of hope to changing the FAA.
Not me either. That's why I was glad Paul didn't make any promises.
Yeah,
But I think a flight training area right over Bandimere Speedway, they'd welcome them with open arms.
Touch and goes.
Yeah.
I was thinking the exact same thing, right down the main street.
Yeah.
so this is the process that, the consultant proposed, just so you know, we don't need to get into the details of this, but, you know, the point is that there's work with the aviation community, there's work with the surrounding communities, and if there's anything that's agreeable to both, that's when we go to the FAA and try and get some blessing there.
I think as a
So-
board, we can make our best effort to get the public to understand the difficulties of changing this. Because what we could do or want to do, and then we got the FAA on top of that, plus tower, it's very difficult.
That's right.
So these are some of the questions we kind of prompted as initial questions, and you guys have already brought up more. But I mainly put these up there to ask you guys if we're missing anything, and you've already, I'm already hearing a bunch of IFR considerations that we haven't, although we do have IFR arrivals and departures on there, but into the details of that for sure. So is there anything else that you would suggest adding on here to kind of first guide a consultant as they work on this?
I'll tell you the other thing that's gonna come up, because it's so tight. What happens to me a lot, and I actually have to request, so first of all, the piston arrivals from the, cause I don't get to burn Jet A like Joe, but yeah. But a lot of times I'll, you know, if it's turbulent over the mountains and it's a big deal, and that's the winds. And when the winds are, you know, I'm not gonna follow the mountains down. If it's smooth, I will. But I need to stay high, and guess where they're gonna, you know, the tower will send me approach, because I'm almost always flight following if I'm not IFR. And they will send me over Boulder. And they'll even send me over Boulder or up that way, the Marshall Lake or whatever. Even just trying to work me in, especially if it's busy with PA training. So, I mean, there's that whole piece of where they have to send people up. So I think also the VFR arrivals from the west of how people are gonna get in and make that work, because there's a lot of challenges there. So I would say the weather conditions over the mountains, the wind is staying high, and then even dropping down.
One of the reasons Ben and I were kind of adamant about hiring a consultant who has this expertise is what we don't want to do is waste, your time, the roundtables, the flight schools, the task force time, thinking we have this great plan.
Yeah.
That when it hits to the FAA goes, start over, a year, 6 months, however long it takes us to come up with some notional routing. So the idea is we would kind of get some legwork done ahead of time while the roundtable gets the funding in place. And then when the consultant comes on board,
That's great.
3 months to 5, it's government, so let's just say 5 months from now, we've at least got some background information, background ideas, maybe even a couple routes that we think would be viable, along with ATC saying, yeah, we could live with that. And then let them take a look at it, and they do the modeling for the noise and a few other things. And they actually have done this in other places, and they sort of escort it through the FAA process. Because what we don't want to do is spend 6 months or a year going through this, having meetings and task force and public meetings and, think you have solved the world's problems, and it doesn't get even through the front door of the FAA.
Right.
So we hope, and then I guess this will be my question to the board. Is this something we want to do at the board meetings, which we could? I would suggest we have a separate task force meeting where we, during the day, so I could bring the flight schools, bring air traffic control, and we bring the public in and do that. But ultimately, I'll leave that to the board to kind of, what do you guys prefer?
Well, I think more of a work session.
Yes.
Format outside of the regular board meeting is going to be more effective.
I agree with Joe.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Be much more effective. As you can see, we can chew up a lot of time talking about this, just like we did tonight. Not only between emotions, but just the difficulty and the complexity of the routes there and the airspace. It was a great move by you guys to bring in a consultant. I mean, a fantastic move, and again, just shows that you care. I think that was a great move, and I'm sure there, as you can tell from this, there are many of us who would join an outside committee and spend hours of time trying to get this better if we could, and we'll work diligently to do that.
Is anybody, good point, Joe. Is anybody familiar with the VFR routes through the LA area?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Almost got busted.
50 feet over the water at the end of the runway. I've done that about 1,000 times.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some.
Randy, it was interesting. I was IFR coming from Fresno to San Diego, and I had to cancel. And then I was gonna land at Whitman, and the winds picked up to 60 knots, and I had to move. And so now I had to plan B. I'm by myself. I don't know, I know it, but I don't know it well. And now they're asking me to fly I got all my IFR charts. Now they're asking me to fly the VFR route. And I just had to tell them, I don't know it. But it's kind of complicated, but I think it ends up working pretty well.
But there are certain altitudes. I mean, there's housing everywhere. So at what altitude do they fly those that supposedly doesn't cause a noise problem?
I'll tell you what's interesting that surprised me is I had to descend to be in it. I had to be.
Because of the traffic coming in. Yeah.
Which blew me away. I couldn't be over 9.
So they're at 9 and they're, well, that's quite high though, compared to what we have out here. Yeah.
I just found it interesting. Yeah, they had to fly, they had to bring me down too.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, we used to fly from Irvine, California,
Right.
to Monterey and have lunch. And we would go that route because we could get down like 50 feet and below at the end of the runway, right off the beach. And that one of those VFR corridors to get through LAX, and then you pop up and head into Monterey. Anything to fly low, that's what helicopters do.
But I do think that's kind of where I think that if you got the FAA aboard and there was a VFR corridor. But I will also tell you that the one difference in that is that's really from traffic going to A to B.
Mhm.
Versus guys trying to go north, and they're gonna do some landings at Fort Collins or all
Yeah.
the various airports, and they're just the VFR or the flight, they're just moving around.
So what Ben and I will do is we'll look at our calendars get hold of the flight schools, send out some, is that a Survey Monkey
Or,
for scheduling?
scheduling,
Is that what that's called?
it'll come from something.
Yeah, anyway, we'll find out where most people are available, and I think, like Joe said, 2 hours is probably not enough. Might, maybe we do lunch and we make a 3-hour meeting to get this thing started and kind of get ahead of it, and then we can maybe go to 2 hours after that, but the first couple in the airport will, buy lunch, actually, Joe and Randy will buy lunch, and,
Well, I guess I
think
volunteer.
that- Yeah,
Is this with this consultant or?
no, this is the pre-work.
Okay,
Again, we want to kind of get the corporate knowledge of this airport
got it.
and these pilots and these flight schools and this air traffic control tower to kind of put some things in perspective and have those questions lined up. So that when the consultant comes in, we already have kind of a baseline of understanding from, again, business jet is doing one thing, air traffic control wants to do a third, GA wants to do a fourth, and, IFR, GA's doing a fifth thing. And how do we get them all kind of aligned in general terms about what's acceptable?
Yeah.
Because we may all go, hey, this is the greatest idea ever, and air traffic control goes, that'll never happen. And we
So
start
like,
over.
you'd probably want the chief flight instructors from the big schools.
Yep. So we did before, when we had the noise task force, we had the owners and their CFIs. So, we had Levi and Greg Boom was there and Danny from Western and, what's his name from Spartan McCare. That was Levi, but we do get the sort of their heavy hitters.
Yeah,
I was thinking, it's even interesting, IFR off of 30. If you're going south, they don't turn you south, they turn you north and come back along there. So almost IFR traffic on 30 goes through that corridor down to departure.
Yep,
that's right.
yep, that's
What we're
exactly.
hearing is it's not the IFR traffic that's climbing so fast. It's, mainly this is a focus probably on the people dragging out over Louisville and Lafayette at 500 feet ATL. That's, I think in our minds, that's kind of what the problem we're trying to solve is. And yeah, we understand there's reasons people might be doing that as well, but maybe ideally not right over the main residential areas unless they absolutely have to.
Which then if you bring them around Louisville, right, and they may go to the west of Louisville, now they're gonna, Boulder's busy.
Yep.
And you got Boulder.
Conundrum.
I think the one thing to keep in mind is we've got smart people, we've got willing people, we've got cooperative people. There may not be a solution. And I think that's what we've been trying to say is we will do our part, we'll reach out, we'll bring in the experts and we'll do our best. But if you just look at that map right there that's on the screen, there's not a lot of airspace, there's not a lot of area to maneuver and create that corridor. There may be some, but, that's why we're here, do our best.
Randy's gonna be buying a lot of lunches.
Where we eat? No, never mind, Paul.
All right, great discussion, everyone. And we got our work cut out for us, no doubt.
One general concept could possibly be too, that you don't turn north until you're 1,000 feet AGL.
Yeah, but that puts it right over Rock Creek area on a lot of those planes. And now we got all that traffic where we were trying to avoid that.
Oh, I don't know Rock Creek, so I was trying to thinking if you think it's that past Louisville?
Well, Rock Creek's straight out on 30, and we want to turn before there because they're the ones complaining. And if we turn early, then we go right up through Louisville. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the complicated things about this is, and one of the things that the FAA is very clear about, is they won't approve a route that takes traffic from one area and then moves it to another area, because then the old people are like, hell yeah, and the new people are like, what the heck? What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
So again, that just adds one more complication to it is we, as a general aviation community, have been trying to turn and head up over the mall and Highway 36 and avoid Rock Creek, but that kind of puts us over the Louisville Lafayette area.
Yep.
What might be helpful, especially for me being new to this, and I don't know the areas as well. When we have that meeting, could we have a map that maybe has, kind of the critical problem areas?
Yeah, see that black area, Don?
But I mean, in the neighborhood, I bet where's the biggest complaint issues?
Yeah, we have that data. I would almost say it's mostly Rock Creek and Superior, but they're right at the end of the runway. So if anyone goes a little bit far, they're getting the complaint, and they're also low because they're so close. I mean, they're less than a mile from the end of the runway. And then right behind it is Louisville, and then Lafayette, kind of about equal. And if you look at that heat map, that kind of says, yeah, Rock Creek, Louisville, and Lafayette are kind of taking the brunt of it.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing is there's a lot of talk, and I think Mr. McBurney said about, well, the tower can change runways, but we all know that they do it based on the winds and based on safety. So towers are never going to arbitrarily say, well, you know, we've sent enough traffic to the north, let's turn the runways around. They're going to say, what is our prevailing primary runway, which is set up for the IFAR, which is set up for all the things that we operate on. But that's another education piece that we got to constantly get out there, that this airport was set up due to the prevailing winds. And they're basically out of the northwest. And so that's where the vast majority of our traffic is going to take off, is off our, you know, primary runway to the northwest. And
So the other one, so that's interesting because I'm almost always westbound myself, probably 90%. And so I'm usually on 30 right. And if I'm not IFR, then I'm going to be quite following, but I'm usually runway heading if there's any planes over on the other side. So they're flying me out over before I can turn west, southwest.
yeah, again, this is not, you know, I think the easiest solution was being in Hawaii. It was, you fly direct to the beach and then you turn left or right and you avoided land as much as possible. We don't have that luxury here. We have huge urban areas, we have mountains, we have, you know, complicated airspace. So that's why it's not something we thought we could undertake by ourselves. We think we can get to a point, but then I think ushering through the FAA process, we really need that consultant. Plus, and Ben said it, I think best, when the airport advisory board or the airport staff or a flight school says, I can't do that because, the public tends not to believe them.
Right.
They just say, well, you're lazy, or you just want to save, you know, $1 in gas, which now is $6 in gas. Whereas if we bring in
Joe's going to Cheyenne. I give him-
whereas if we have an outside consultant and he says, hey, this is the reason we're doing this, is all these things, it sort of is an impartial person. So we think that's going to help with the public perception.
Well, they know how to package it.
Yep, and then it ultimately will help us get it through the process of the FAA, if we ever get to that point. We may not.
Well, it's probably what Joe does in hiring an expert witness for the
Yep.
trial, right?
All the time. That was a great idea. Great decision.
Thanks all for the initial input.
So look for some possible dates to meet on a web-based survey program that asks
Or
you.
just whatever we can.
Or just pick a date.
Yeah, and then this is not a one and done. This is going to be a process, and it's going to take smart, rational people to include the public. Like Joe said, Mr. McBurney is a rational person. He's made public comment before at our meetings. He kind of gets it. So to have someone there that's rational and can listen and make comment, I think is going to be helpful.
Absolutely.
Hey, Paul, if we start this before I'm not coming back for about 6 weeks. So if I'm not there, do you want my credit card number?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, great discussion, everyone. We're close to the end of our time. Ben or Paul, do we have anybody in the room that has a quick comment to make before we close?
Question.
Tony has a question.
Oh, Tony, go ahead.
Paul had discussed with us all and sent out a survey about steering committees. Where do we stand with those steering committees?
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up.
Check with me next week.
We were negotiating and working some things, over the last couple months. And some things fell out, some things didn't occur. So at the time, so this was about, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks ago. We no longer need those steering committees.
Okay.
We think eventually something like that will occur again, and then we'll reattack. But the things that we were working on kind of fell apart through no fault of the airports.
Of course.
That's right.
Hey, Paul, is it
That
possible?
kind of forget about that. Say again, Randy?
I'm gonna say, is it possible maybe in the next 2 months that we could have an executive session and you can kind of bring us up to date, the board, on some of this stuff that's going on and fell out, stuff like that?
Absolutely.
It kind of be nice for all of us to catch up on some of that.
Yep, that is allowed under, I'm not a lawyer, but I've got a few that are in the room and on the phone. That's allowed under the Colorado rules that this board can go into executive session. And I'll get the wording from the county attorney so that we do it right, but that is
Okay.
absolutely possible, Randy.
All right, great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Any public comments? Anybody in the room?
I think the weather scared everybody away, Phil. There's nobody in
Okay,
the room.
it's just you guys. Good discussion tonight, everyone. Thanks for participating. We'll call it adjourned right at the right time. And look forward to those notifications that Paul said he'd send out so we can go to the next steps.
Fantastic.
All right, thanks
Thanks.
everyone.
Good to see everybody.
Thanks,
Good to see you.
Thanks, Paul.
Yep,
Enjoy.
see ya.
What do you